Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us here for Awaken Your Inner Genius. And tonight we're talking about Lesson 27 and Unit 7, based on the home study course for Walter and Leo Russell. For right now, we have our panelists. We have Ken Pearson, our student of 30 years. We have Margaret Rue, who is a student of 50 years, actually lived with Leo for 10 years as a board member of the University of Science and Philosophy. And we have Karen Elkins, Science to Sage editor. We also have Jim Porter, which we're working to get back on, having a bit of a technical glitch, but we are glad to have everyone back here. Hard to believe we are at the end of 2024. So before we dive in here, there is Jim. So glad to have him back. Before we dive in here, why don't we all just take a moment from this very busy holiday season and just recalibrate where we are to tune in ocean sound that was gifted to us before. Close your eyes, or you can meditate on what's there in front of you. Find yourself tuning into the universal heartbeat. Relax. Drop into your heart center. Knowing that when we're grounded and with the universal heartbeat, all other things, that beautiful sunset. Bring into your awareness all that you hold and treasured and dear and loved for this world. And may we be the beginning here of moving towards our cosmic aim. All right. Another deep breath in and out. And if you come back to us here, so glad to have you. So as we mentioned, we're here in Unit 7. We have 2 lessons left in Unit 7 here. Just wanted to remind us about why we do this here. And we do this because the whole show is based on this particular quote from Walter Russell. And it says this, it says, mediocrity is self-inflicted there on slide 4. Mediocrity is self-inflicted and genius is self-bestowed. So that is our focus here. And we are focused on the home study course. And the next slide that you'll see, the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. And wanted to remind everyone, if you can read this next quote for everybody, just to remind them of how important it is.
If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe.
All right. So even though we're diving into some deeper discussions here, so glad to have everyone with us here from TikTok, from YouTube, from our other social media channels. We are focused on the home study course. You'll see a picture of that on the screen. And it is truly one of my dearest possessions. The intent is to read 1 unit per month. And that is the protocol that we're following for this first year of launching the Awaken Your Inner Genius. You'll see on this next screen, you may want to take a screenshot of this, but this is everything according to Walter and Leo Russell that is included for Unit 7. You think that's enough, Jim? You can come off mute. You think that's enough?
Yeah, we can handle it. We'll get through.
So Margaret, if you'll come off mute as well, it always tickles me when I see this, and I know we'll be going back to the panel here. Margaret, they have a 4-pager that outlines everything that was in the home study course, and that was all very purposeful, was it not?
Very much, and actually it's a very brilliant read, and we have that on the philosophy.org site, and it really makes you anxious to get the course and study it after reading the syllabus.
It does. It does. Well, and we're excited. I'm broadcasting from my virtual studio, which is here at the museum. And Ken, you are also at the museum tonight. Why don't you share with everybody the importance of what's behind you?
I believe I'm sitting in Leo's chair that she did the PM magazine interview with. So this is like... I'm filling in her shoes. You know what I mean? I'm going to put on her dress in a minute, and then I'll definitely fill in her shoes.
Well, and you're there in front of the bookcase that has Walter and Leo's entire personal book collection as well.
Yeah. It's quite a little piece there. When you look at it, it's pretty amazing how many books. As you go through it, you can see how the things that they read, and they're all for the mind. They all incorporate the mind. It's a huge big bookshelf, of course, and not to mention their own library that they wrote. My God, and I don't think any of those books are in here actually.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and begin? So, just one word for the lesson tonight, Jim. As we go into our first page on 529, what is the most important thing you want people to know about the lesson tonight?
Me? Off the top of my head, or am I supposed to read something? I'm sorry.
I'm just asking you for a quick comment before we get into the reading.
To me, the most important thing that they need to remember tonight is what it says on the first page of Unit 1. The most important thing that you can do in life is meditate.
Okay.
So as you go into this and you have questions, throw questions at us. We'll answer, but keep in mind, we're students. You want absolute truth and answer, give it to God in your heart when you go to sleep at night.
All right. So, Margaret, why don't we start with what's that's circled in yellow right there? That is the introduction to today's, which can be a little daunting if anybody's brand new, but don't worry. Just tune into the vibration of what it is that we're discussing here tonight. So, if you would read that and get us started in those first two sentences, Margaret.
Yeah. Transient matter and the omnipresent zero. To know our universe is as necessary as to know ourselves.
All right. I thought that was a very powerful sentence right there, because, and I encourage anyone that's actually with us here this evening to type that into the chat box. To know our universe is to know ourselves. I'll shorten it. To know our universe is to know ourselves. And why is that important, Jim? It's
because the universe is us. It's such it's a massive leap to take, because let me put it this way. If you had a line of light bulbs and the first one was 4 watts, I'm a 4-watt bulb, but I know I'm all the bulbs in their entirety. I know that I am absolute. I know that my intellect, I'm saying it wrong. My presence here in body is universal. My body is not, but my presence here is universal. And that, so you're being asked by the Russells to take that leap, to understand that you're not limited to body or body things. You are a universal being expressing through them. All right, Jim's jumping ahead for us here. He's diving right in, and I absolutely love that. So a couple of sentences, and then I'm going to ask Ken to comment, and I want to take us into this next one. As I continue with that paragraph, Margaret, it says, a wonderful philosophy teaches us how to live, but we must live in an environment which is filled to the brim with laws and conditions which will control us if we do not have the knowledge to control them. And for that reason, we devote as much earnest endeavor to give you knowledge of your universe as we do to give you knowledge of your spiritual zero self and physical body of motion. The more you become aware of the two universes of mind and motion, which you constantly interchange within every second of your life, the more you'll reach that highest state, which all mankind must someday reach, which is God's intent for the very creation of man. Ken, if you would read that, what's circled next, if we scroll down just a bit, the more knowledge.
The more knowledge you acquire of creation's secrets, the more you will comprehend what Jesus meant when he said, my Father and I are one.
Anything you want to add to that before we go into that next paragraph?
Yeah, you know, what this unit is really going to help me to understand and help everybody who's reading this to understand is that we are not our bodies. We are our minds. And this is a thought wave universe. So the universe of matter is not where energy lies. Energy lies in the idea behind the matter. The matter is a representation of ideas, sort of like the painter and the painting. The painting is not the painter. The painting is an extension of the painter of a concept they received in their mind, not their body, when it is so inspired. So what we're going to really be able to do is help to differentiate of what does that mean if there's no energy and matter. So where is the energy? And in the lesson, we're going to disclose where the energy is and how it's a lot simpler when it's not about knowing every element of creation, it's knowing the concept behind creation. And that's what we're going to break down tonight in this lesson.
Well, and I want to just go ahead and mention to everyone who's listening. Hello, Rita. Hello, Deb, Karen, Diane. So glad to see you all. There is no way we can cover everything in this particular lesson. Is that a fair way to say it, Margaret and Jim? There's no way that we can cover everything. during our time together. But there were several key things that I wanted to bring out because it's very powerful, not only for our own knowledge, but how we can influence others. And so it goes into the next paragraph talking about the textbooks tell you that there are two kinds of electricity. Let us show you how impossible this is and how out of keeping it is with nature. And notice, for those of you that have your copy, nature is capitalized. The light waves, which science erroneously calls electricity, do only one thing: they compress divided pairs and force them into collision. Then they cease to compress and expand to their zero beginning. Now, as we go into these next two paragraphs, there are some really, really big ideas. It says this, and I'll ask the panel to comment. It does not require two forces to compress or expand anything. If you wish to compress air into your tire, you compress it with a force exerted in one direction, which is from inward from the outside. The greater force that you use in that direction, the greater the multiplication of pressure within your tire is compared with the pressure outside of it. That is the way God creates all matter. So let's pause there for a moment. I'm going to have us bring up an image of a tire while we're talking, but team, if you would just respond to that, because I'm sure most people didn't think we'd be talking about tires. So who wants to dive in first?
I'd recommend Pirellis if I was going to suggest tires. They're definitely, Michelin's definitely are not the right tire.
Well, I was just bringing up elements of tires because I just thought it's very interesting that we don't often, guys think about tires more than I think certainly than I do, but explain to me right quick what it's talking about, the compression. Jim?
Well, look at the tires as a balloon or as your lungs. When you draw air into them, they expand, and the pressure inside of the tire, lungs, or balloon multiplies. It increases. It wants to go outward, but it cannot go outward because it's surrounded by the tire. So as that pressure builds up, it takes a great deal of work and effort and desire on the part of the one pushing the air in to create that pressure in the tire, but it takes no effort to release it. So there's only one action. This is what they're pointing out. The only work is in creating the body. The release of the body back to God is automatic. It just goes through that cycle. So if you want to let the air out of the tire, you're going to remove that body of air that's in the tire. All you have to do is take the cap off.
All right. Well, I wanted to pause for a moment because in the next paragraph, you don't have to pull it up, James. I just want to read everybody. It says the zero universes are without strain or tension. All of the wave universe of motion is under constant strain. All matter is imprisoned by compressed motion. So this is the first two sentences right there at the bottom of page 530. All of the wave universe of motion is under constant strain, which I thought the tire really did an excellent job of explaining that. All matter is imprisoned by compressed motion. This is going to be important for us later. Now, I bring this up because I don't know about you, Margaret, but tires have always been a little bit of a bane of my existence. Like, I don't understand why when it gets cold, my tires have to have more air or less air. This has always been a man thing in my life. So I count on the men just to take care of the tires. But if I were to equate that, Jim, to nature, it really, the tires are just a nice visual to remind us of what's happening with matter, is it not?
Yes, up until the fourth octave, it's under continuous compression. That's filling the tire. That's creating the body. And the rings that appear from that compression, the rings are trying to expand out, and the coldness of space prevents them from expanding outward. So they only have one choice: to build more pressure and expand inward. It's that simple. It really is that simple. The desire to be and create bodies causes the inward compression. It takes no desire for the outward compression. You just have to let it go.
All right. So when you're
can I expound on the point that we were getting out of two different types of energies, which is what we started with, and what that means and why a tire is a great example? Is the air is pushed into the tire and the air is pushed out. There's no two different directions. That's what they're trying to explain. Is there not two different kinds of electricity? Is the force is pushed in, not pulled in, and the air is not pulled out, it's pushed out. So it's still always the same direction, same kind of energy. So the key being too is when you inflate a tire, it's also starting to slowly leak. As in nature, it's always one direction is always simultaneously coinciding with the next direction. But it's the same motion, it's the same energy. It's pushing, not pulling.
Now, this is going to make more sense as we go along. Margaret, you had something you wanted to add before I have us continue?
Yeah, Leo always said that it's hard to live, but easy to die. So, in other words, life is hard. So, even when you think of, your own body, everyone has to take care of their own body. Now, a person that doesn't care about their body, they won't put effort into it. They'll let it go, and then it expands. So, in other words, everything in life is really, it's a huge effort. Life is a huge effort, and it's necessary. That Leo always said that the more you give to life, the more is re-given for your own soul awakening. But I think the best way to remember it is life is hard and death is easy.
Yeah, that's quite a phrase. I know Karen is on the back panel with us, and she's pulling together some additional things for us. We'll have to ask her for a T-shirt. Let's pull up Bonnie's comment right quick. This is pretty funny. Just went through the tire business along very little tire sensors that traumatize you when the light comes on in your car panel.
Even when
All
they're
going
not
to make a lot more sense in just a moment. So let's go on down to the middle of page 531 by the green star. And Jim, if you would please read that section right by the green stars that's underlined.
If you fully comprehend this, you can see now, or you can now comprehend that great mystery which Einstein thought to be insolvable. The mystery as to how matter emerges from space and how space swallows it up again, which will be explained in the last lessons.
All right, scroll down to the highlighted yellow, Ken, if you would read that, because this is all taking us to a place.
It was because the two opposite conditions of living and dying, growing and decaying, heating and cooling, polarizing and depolarizing, and all other effects of motion are expressed in opposite directions by seemingly opposite forces, which we just kind of explained. They're not opposite forces. They're just opposite directions, but it's the same force.
Well, and what's interesting about this is it goes down to where the blue brackets are. It says motion is created, which emerges from the creator's vacuum and returns to it. Likewise, life is a creation, which emerges from the creator's eternal life condition and returns to it. So let's jump down to the tire analogy right quick again, because we have
I would encourage you to just finish that sentence because it really helps you to understand how it's not two different energies. It just tells you the last two sentences there.
Go ahead.
Also, heat emerges from the eternal cold. So that tells you how matter is brought to the universe. It comes from the cold emptiness of space where there is no matter. Just like sound comes from silence, matter comes from stillness. So motion comes from stillness rather. So and sound emerges from eternal silence and returns to it without any aid from opposite kind of force. The return journey to zero is a relaxation of the compressed force. So that's kind of the best way to explain. There's not two kinds of energies. So we simplify it. It is, as we said in the beginning, if you can count from 0 to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. And that is what you're seeing right there. It's not that complicated.
Now, for anyone that's wondering where we're going with this, hang tight, just breathe through this, because this is based on natural law, natural science, okay? That's what, and living philosophy, universal law, natural science, and living philosophy, because to me, Jim, when I was studying it this weekend, it explained a great deal of actually what happens with our own bodies. To me, it explained that journey. So I encourage everybody who isn't quite scientifically oriented to hang tight. So in the circle, the yellow circle on page 532, it says this. It says, your tire wants to explode outward. That you know. So does the battery in your car. It wants to explode outward. We do not use the word explode for that effect, however, for we now use the word discharging. discharge. Leaking, radiating, discharging, depolarizing, and exploding are all the same effect. So also are decay, death, and combustion. So also are radioactivity and fission. Now, Margaret, for someone who's brand new listening to this, why is it important that we understand that everything wants to expand outwards?
Well, I think what the Russells are pointing out is there's growth and then there's decay. And there's a graduation between one and the other. So you always have, whenever you have anything that's visual, you always have something that is under compression. But the eternal vacuum is the ultimate equilibrium, and the Russells call it the zero or the universal vacuum. And all matter, all desire ultimately returns to the universal vacuum. And it is ever pervasive. So it goes all the way through us, it's everywhere. And so everything that's visual and anything that you can hear ultimately has to return to that zero, that stillness, only to be brought back out again. So it's happening in cycles.
Yes, it is.
And it's happening so fast that we have the interpretation that it's continuous.
Right.
But in actuality, we are returning to the zero thousands of times, if not millions of times a second. So, but that eternal vacuum, the rest in the vacuum is what we are continually harnessing the energy from that.
Well, there's something there's a very powerful illustration here in the museum that I'm going to have us pull up in just a moment on slide 31, but I want to read something first at the bottom of page 532. Remember that every action you perform causes motion, and all motion is wave interchanging, which moves spirally, and every spiral is a series of rings around holes. Remember also that you cannot cut a section through any wave current anywhere without producing rings which spin spirally around holes. All right, I want to pause there for a moment and bring up this image page on slide 31. So this is, I bring this up to you because for many of you that are joining us, you have a deep knowing of this. And for me, it was this illustration when that first time I walked into the museum, and on that bottom left-hand side, it says the opening and closing of spirals. I can't see it. I have to zoom in a little bit. What does it say? The opening and closing of spirals constitutes the heartbeat of the universe. So at that moment, when I walked by that illustration, this is one of, maybe someday we can even have Ken have a camera and go through the museum. But this illustration to me, it was a knowing. When I will never forget the moment of knowing that I had come flood through my body when I understood that sentence, the opening and closing of spirals constitutes the heartbeat of the universe. Jim?
I couldn't agree with you more. And they're the spiral galaxies up there on the right-hand side, if you notice. You see the black rivers of light, that's the end winding, which science does not recognize. And then the lit up ones are the star clusters or the outwinding, the regiving. Each is an equal and opposite to the other. But like Margaret was pointing out, the darkness is that we do not see and cannot measure, the void. It borns the light that you see that's winding outward. And it's an eternal thing. Try to grasp this real easily. The universe is as eternal as creator, because creator who is eternal created it. But the universe is in constant in and out exchange with itself, in constant motion. And because it's in constant motion, it's not fixed. And anything that is fixed, not fixed, is an illusion because it's not fixed.
It's not created. Remember, it's creating. And going back to the zero universe, a good way to explain it is think of a trampoline. And the flatness of that trampoline would be the zero vacuum universe. The minute you put your finger down on that trampoline, you create a little swell in it, right? Now you get gravitational force, you get motion going because you put pressure, it puts a compression. Well, the trampoline wants to return, and think of the trampoline like a vacuum of space. It covers everything. So when you put pressure on it, it equally wants to come back. So everything that's happening is absolutely unhappening once it reaches its maximum potential. But the vacuum is like thinking of a flat trampoline, and like when you put pressure on it. I think that was about the simplest analogy I felt like I could really connect to what they mean by the vacuum or the zero stillness of space.
Well, and what I was trying to bring up, I'm one of the, and I'll come back to you, Margaret, but part of what I wanted to mention to folks is, and part of why we encourage so many people to come actually to this location, and even if you can't, to be sure you go through the archives on the philosophy.org site, is because you can see some of these images, and there is a deep knowing. Many of you, I am cracking up though. Margaret, can you read Bonnie's comment? This one's making me laugh because then Karen had something to say. What did Bonnie have to say?
Oh, she says, Lordy, after having everything mansplained to me, I think I'm going to Russell explain it back.
I thought that was funny. And then Karen Mahan had a comment after that. She said, oh my gosh, I love this. So the reason I was excited, as someone who I shared with many of you that 3 years ago, I knew nothing of the Russells. You're looking at 3 other students on the screen here that combined have 130 years of experience here with the Russells. I have 3 in this lifetime. And for me, it was an awakening moment of knowing that opening and closing of spirals constitutes the heartbeat of the universe. And when you understand that, what I find so exciting about the Russell work, like Ken just explained with the trampoline, is that when you begin to equate what looks so complicated here in our home study course with things that we actually know of, that all of a sudden the world becomes more magical. Does that resonate, Jim?
Yes. And if I live to be 95 years old before I refold, that's my life. That's my lifespan. That's my in breath.
Please, not that long, man.
Well, that's my in breath and my out breath. Yet a simple in breath and out breath is the same expression, the same thing that happens in moments. It's all based on how long it takes it to happen. And when I was giving the tours, I would point out to people that a corpuscular unit of light comes into and out of existence full 9 cycles of the wave, 186,400 times a second in the carbon octave. It's the same thing as a sun coming into and out of expression. The only thing that differs is size and time. The principle's always the same.
All right, so I wanted to bring up a couple of things because this is lower on page 533. I want to go to the green brackets, and it says the rings that you see are the ultimate particles of creation. In the green brackets, it says this. Scroll down, please. No, up. Yeah, okay. I got to get James and I got to get that green up a little bit, James. So up a little bit, James, so I can see the little green brackets right there. Okay, so there is no other form in nature than the opening and closing rings. They are the basis and substance of all forms. So I want to skip down to this paragraph with the yellow highlight. Once again, we repeat that this universe of motion consists entirely of light waves which thrust outward from their fulcrum in pairs. They do not pull inward from within. Ken, can you read the last part of that section?
He's out.
Okay, again, we say electricity does but one thing. It compresses to divide into pairs for the purpose of manifesting the control of gravity. And all that it does is performed against the resistance of the universal vacuum, which finally conquers every effort of compression to stimulate cohesion of matter. Now, before you all roll your eyes here, hang tight because it's going to come crystal clear. Remember that every action which is recorded in nature, capital N, like the growth of a tree or the throwing of a stone in water, produces rings with holes in them. So before I ask the panel to comment, I want to just have you bring up my tree rings here. I wanted to remind you all, in case you haven't looked at tree rings, it's slide 18. So I'm going to read this again as you're looking at the tree rings on 18. Okay. So every action is recorded in nature, like the growth of a tree, or the next slide, the throwing of a stone into water produces rings with holes in them. Who wants to comment on the panel?
Well, you can go back to the tree rings, if you would, James. And what we're looking at is a tree compressed. And when you look at a decaying tree, you'll see that the center starts to bore out. Instead of it's decaying from the outside in, it actually decays from the inside out. So as a tree is formed, it starts out as one little tube, which would be in that center that you see right there. And then it's added to and added to and added to. And each ring compresses more that illusion of density, like Margaret was talking about. It's just moving so fast. We think it's dense, but it's not. But if you look at a dead tree, you'll see that the center is evacuated. And thus, when it falls, it's kind of empty in the middle of it. You see a lot of porous, empty Swiss cheese in there. And it's evacuating. So compression, expansion, same force.
This lesson was particularly fun for me today. I haven't had a chance to share with Margaret and Jim, but my own brand, Kimberly Faith, my logo is tree rings. I've always had an affinity for trees, and it is tree rings. And it was always about that compression and expansion. And so the book I'm working on right now is called The Mystery of Yourself. And I have to wonder if there wasn't something deep in my heart that kind of knew this philosophy, because we all know that the older a tree is, the more rings it has, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because then it explains this, you don't have to go back to this. I want to keep the visual up. The young tree starts that way as a tube, but it closes its holes by compression to become a solid. And every solid is a series of ring layers, which eventually open to let space in gradually until space becomes all and the tree disappears entirely to it.
And you can actually see that when you look at the outer rim, the rings are tighter and then they get wider as you go towards the center. So the center is already starting to expand. When it first started, it was much tighter. And
isn't that interesting?
You see that gradual process.
I never really had even put two and two together like that. So let's pull up Deborah's question for the panel. And she says this. She says, are the paired light waves paired as masculine and feminine?
Yes, they are.
Yes.
All right.
My thought on the masculine and feminine again is, the masculine is the compressive and the feminine is the expansive. It's the interaction with the two that creates the ring. In other words, you have the universal vacuum that resists compression. Because it's resisting the compression, that's why you have heat generated.
So you're saying compression and expansion. Those are two important. So what did you say? You said the masculine is compression.
The male is compressive and the
stop right there. Stop right there. For anybody listening, go ahead and type in the chat box. Compression is masculine.
Right.
Yes.
Compression is masculine. I'm slowing us down because I want us to get that. Compression is masculine. And then what's the next part of it, Margaret?
Yeah, so the feminine is the expansive.
Okay, so expansion is feminine.
Mm-hmm. But you see, it's the interchange between the two that creates the rings, because you have the compressive coming in, right? But you can, the compression has to have a stopping point. The very center, like if you look at the tree rings, the very center, that's the hole that the Russells indicate. In other words, there's always a very tiny vacuous center for everything, because that's the center is what's resisting the compression.
Okay.
And it's the interchange between the two that creates the illusion of solidity.
All right, so we have a lot more to go. I'm slowing us down there because as a new student in this lifetime, it took me a while to get this philosophy. So I'm slowing down our very seasoned Russell students, and it is time for our first break. So this is a big lesson, exciting things. Do take some time to depolarize for just a moment. Enjoy your 3 minutes, get some water, stand up, get some oxygen. We will see you in 3. right, if you're within earshot, please find your way back. So much beauty in the wisdom that we're studying here today. So much beauty. So I wanted to go back. I want to take us over here to page 534, and the panel pushes back and encourages me in different directions. If there's something I missed, please jump in. But this was really, really poignant to me. And the first highlighted sentence on page 534. Ken, could you read that where it's highlighted? It says, "These words."
These words all tell of the way compressed matter tries to escape from its compressed imprisonment. Yes,
So-
we talk about the tire.
So I wanted to talk about that and relate it for a moment to us. So that's part of what we're talking about right now, even with the awakening of humanity. And this is part of when our journey, what Jim said, when you go back to death, and what Margaret just said, it's hard to live and easier to die. We have this desire for this expansion, just like the air in a tire has a desire for escape. Is that a fair way to say it, Jim?
Yes,
It also applies to breathing.
It does.
it applies to every action, reaction in existence, everything that we can record
Right.
and see happening.
For me, it was I have felt this the whole life of people trying to place me in a box. And I know that's for many of us is in this lifetime that we all feel many times people are just kind of trying to put us in a box, and we have this desire to expand and almost jump out of this box. And to me, when I was equating my body, my human journey with this experience, I was like, that's really what many of us are dealing with at the moment, isn't it? That we have this great desire to expand as well.
But when you say expand, are you mean increasing in wisdom?
I'm increasing in wisdom and light. That's all I'm saying, is that I feel like compressed matter.
Mhm.
Right, because when you know the Russells, whenever they talk of expansion, they're always talking of returning to rest, returning to the zero, or relaxation. So in other words, that's why we should all take a vacation, and be religious about taking vacations, because you do recharge in a vacation. You change your thinking. You can come back with even more energy to create. And
So
that's why
while you're talking, Margaret, I want to ask James to bring up slide 41 and 40 from Unit 4, because this is what you're talking about. Keep going.
yes. So what I was saying, people should give themselves, permission to relax, and especially in the evening time. The daytime is for work. The daytime is for activity. The evening is for recharge. And so it's the interchange between the two that makes you more effective in everyday life.
Okay.
It's the balanced interchange between the two.
Mm-hmm.
A rhythmic balanced interchange.
RBI. Yep, rhythmic balance interchange.
All right. So let's keep going then. As we dive into this, I wanted to go ahead down to the bottom of 535. This was a really big lesson to get into, and I wanted to talk about this key here because it was explaining about what science. So scroll to the top, please, where I say the word key, because it was talking about the premise of why we understand electricity the way we do. And this has been especially poignant because the place that Ken and I live, we've been dealing with some electrical issues already, and I've had a front row seat to electrical issues. But it talks about how the idea of a universal vacuum never entered into the thinking or reasoning of early observers of effective motion. Lacking that concept, they lacked their first essential premise. And so I wanted to pause there just for a moment because as we go to slide 20, I'm going to just show the panel this right quick. But there, in my work when I wrote a book for women, I actually learned that science had erroneously declared some things about women way back. And this book, Inferior, actually was one of my research points. And it talked about how back in the day, science had actually was saying that women were less intelligent than men. And because of that erroneous premise, all right, yep, Jim, I see you chuckling. Because of that erroneous premise, science, we can go back to the panel, science then built onto that erroneous premise for many, many, many decades, that which is being dialed back even now. So the reason I bring this up is because I believe that many people listening, it might not be that they actually explain this science to someone, but they have electrical engineers in their family. They have scientists in their family. They have the ability to influence people who might have their view of the world based on these old premises. Panel?
Well, it still exists out there, but it's fast changing. Limitation. Look, the Russell make it very clear. We are equal, but opposite expressions. Equal. But too often they want to drop out the equal because a feminine personality might react in a different way to a masculine personality. But it's an equality between the two. I have feminine in me. It's almost 50% of who I am.
I would say 90%, probably up in the
Well, thank you.
95.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
And the women on the screens have masculine in them. And the
I
whole
do.
purpose of life in creating a divine body that can express God absolutely is to find absolute balance between your masculine and feminine natures. That's what illumination is. When you have absolute balance between your feminine and masculine natures, you void them out and you become divine.
All right, so I wanted to go down to this red box, and then Margaret, I'll ask you to chime in. The red box on 535, because it said, now this was printed in the 1951?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
51.
so it says, science has not yet discovered that there are 4 pairs of poles in a wave, and not just the 2, which it calls positive and negative on opposite ends of the bar magnet. That is because it has never yet related the octaves of the elements of matter to optics, as we will do in the last lessons of this course. So that's really important to remember, that this was written back in the 1950s, and they were trying to change the way people thought then. That's a large part of what Leo was trying to do, wasn't it, Margaret?
I think that it's the bar magnet, when people put two south poles together or 2 north poles together, they repel. And so they mistakenly said, in other words, this is always a little bit tricky for me, because the Russells, when you actually put a negative or a north and a south together, you're actually voiding the north and south. And so the actual center of the bar magnet is changed, or the fulcrum of the bar magnet is changed.
So let's pull up slide 29. I pulled up the 4 bar magnet illustrations that are here at the museum, just one room over from where Ken is today. And Jim, you want to take a shot at explaining your thoughts here, and then I'll ask Ken to chime in, as simple as we can get yet before we go into the later lessons.
What Margaret's talking about, if you look at the one in the center, you have 2 separate bar magnets. At the center of each of those bar magnets is 0. Absolute 0.
Right.
If you were to take those 2 magnets, and you see the next where they put together, now the 0 goes from center, the positive negative that was the opposite poles of the 2 goes out to these poles, and the 0 moves to center. That's what God means when he says, I am within all things, centering them. Any body individually, or any 2 bodies that come together and make a greater body, are always centered by divinity. Always.
Oh, wow.
And that's where do you go to find your divinity? Within. That's where you'll find it.
Well, yeah, when you look at your human body too, if you look at it, it's divided by an equator that runs through the center of your body. That is the stillness of creation. You are centered by that same 0 stillness. We all are. You draw a line right down your body. You think you got a line, split you right in half. You got a left and right, left side and a right side. And the same thing with the brain. So you can see how, it would be a great way to say this, or to simplify this, because we're getting a little bit, I think, above where people are going to be able to comprehend, probably, is what's more important, the air going into the tire or the air going out? Are they both essential for the tire to function?
Right.
You couldn't do one without the other.
Right.
So
Just like
neither
the
is more
in-breath.
important.
Just like the in-breath and the out-breath. I mean, then we all know that we need both the in-breath and the out-breath. But if we've met in corporate America, we may have teams that are debating what team is more important, the in-breath or the out-breath. So what you're saying is that both are important. And the only reason I brought up those particular illustrations is I wanted to encourage everyone just to think, when Walter had that illumination in 1921, and then he spent the rest of his life capturing all of these things that he saw, that he was shown. You know, he didn't have computers, he didn't have Photoshop, he didn't have Motion, Adobe, and there he was with a canvas trying to sketch out and beautifully show us what it was about. I just have a deep appreciation. Margaret?
Yeah, I think another, the science always calls it a positive electricity or a negative electricity. Like if you take a car battery, they always have a positive pole and a negative pole. Now, the battery is charged, right? But when you actually extract electricity from the battery is desiring to return to the zero vacuum. That's why it has a current, and the current is discharging. So the Russells are saying that you charge a battery or you discharge a battery. So it seems to be a two-way motion, but it's only one type of electricity, right? So
Okay.
in other words, when you discharge a battery, the battery is desiring to go back to the vacuum zero. And then when it discharges entirely, there's no more motion, there's no more charge.
Okay.
So
That was a lovely explanation. Margaret is quite the scientist. For those of you that haven't spent time with Margaret, you can find some of her presentations on the USP YouTube channel. But Ken, where would you like us to go? 536 had a lot of very important things. I had some things down towards the end of where they had underlined. Where the red star is, they're scrolling down on page 536, because what I said is, if this is when they introduced the whole idea of sex, and it says, if the sex idea in relation to electricity had occurred to them, speaking of previous scientists, there would have never been a Coulomb law nor a nucleus in an atom. Nothing could be more convincing to sensed reasoning than the very self-evident fact that there must be two kinds of electricity. Even if the electric current did run only one way, but with an unproved suspicion that it ran two ways. Then some new and important discoveries were made which proved that the current ran two ways, and that fact was misinterpreted as being proof of only of their theory. I mean, there was even a movie out many years ago called Current Wars, where it talked about the great debate way back.
Yes.
So you know what I would do from that paragraph? Actually, it was a great explanation. The answer is on 537, first paragraph, the electric current. You can read that, love.
All right, so let's jump on down there. The electric current that Edison observed was the radiation from a heated condition. So just breathe through this. Remember, you don't have to intellectually understand this. Deep down, you know. From a heated condition, seeking the cold equilibrium of space. It did not need to be in an evacuated tube. It is the same effect which your hands feels from the rays of the sun, or which your body feels from the hot stove in a room. It has always been known under the name of radiant energy. Radiation creates electric current. Radiation is deduction, so does generation. Generation is induction. One compresses, the other expands, but it is the same light wave current. Any movement of any kind creates a light wave current, even the movement of your little finger.
So don't think you're insignificant, right? If you're creating a wave just by the motion of your little finger, right? And we are all the sum total of the thoughts that we've harvested in our lives and that we continue to harvest. So if you're radiating good thoughts, then you're going to probably radiate good energy. If you're compressing bad thoughts, then it's going to weigh you down and you're going to feel heavy in life and things aren't going to look good. And thus we're out of balance, right? So this is telling it pretty simple, is that it's, again, the same energy. The hot stove is concentrated, and when you feel the heat in the room, that's the expansive part of that hot stove. Each needs the other. And again, we'll go back to the breath. What's more important, the in breath or the out breath? When you breathe, right? Try and hold your breath, take a breath, and then not breathe out and see if you don't explode, right? Try and breathe out and see if you don't come to a point where you have to inhale. That is the piston pumps, the heartbeat of the universe right there in motion. Now, before you breathe in you breathe in, once you breathe in, before you breathe out, there is a momentary pause of equilibrium of zero stillness. You find an equator of zero stillness, and then you breathe out. There is that timeless moment between in and out that you can't measure, but yet we know it's there.
Well, and that's part of why we on this channel offer a 24-hour channel where you can hear the oceans, because we keep wanting to go back to this idea of that universal heartbeat. Margaret, you wanted to chime in?
Well, just one other, coming back to the breath. You know, it's actually is an effort to breathe in. In other words, you're pushing your diaphragm down.
Russian, yeah, you're heating.
But when you're releasing, it's effortless. So again, you know, it takes effort, right, to live. You're breathing in. That's effort. But when you release your diaphragm, that's when you're breathing out. And that's effortless.
Well, and that's that expansion that we're saying we actually get. Okay, we desire.
When you breathe in, you're heating up, and when you breathe out, you're cooling down.
Okay, so these are
that's male. When you breathe out, that's female.
All right, so this
So
is really
Jim's
important.
right. He's male, female all the time.
This is really important for everybody who's listening, because it sounds like this is a lot, but what I want you to think about is all these little blocks are building a foundation to get you to the end of the home study course. The more we spend time on these things, the more it's going to impact you. And I wanted to go to the first sentence on page 538, because I want to talk about the wave for just a moment. Waves are motion. Please type that in the chat box. Waves are motion, any kind or stages of motion. When motion ceases, waves cease. Okay, I'll come back to this in just a moment. I want to show you the image on slide 21. So waves are motion. We have a couple of questions there. So when we speak, there's waves that are going out there, and we have a gift for you that Karen Elkins has pulled together. It is based on the salutation of the day that Ken did last time. She's pulled together a wonderful visual journey. But when he was recording it today, I wanted to bring this up to everybody over there on slide 32, is that if you'll take a look at this, I want to encourage all of you this week to slide 22. I was wrong. That I need my reading glasses. Slide 22, to go to your voice memo app on the phone. And when you are recording a voice memo, have you ever done this, Jim, Margaret? If you've ever recorded a voice memo, if you haven't ever paid attention to it, there are waves. And so you can test, the lower your volume is, the more expressive you are. You can test seeing the wave patterns of your own voice. And I found this incredibly interesting when we're sitting here talking about when motion ceases, waves cease. So I'll continue with this, because in the next part on page 538, it says, when you breathe in, you cause an increase in the speed of centripetal motion. Centripetal is an important word. You're going to hear this later. When you breathe out, you decrease the speed of motion, and it is centrifugal. Motion is the same kind of motion, whether it is fast or slow. Ken?
I was just going to say centripetal means to wind up, and centrifugal means to unwind.
So a lovely way to examine this, I don't have a top with me. I'll go find it during our break, as a matter of fact. But I mean, a children's top that you can see winding up and winding down motion. I'll get that during our break so you can actually see it, because remember, we actually know these things. All right, so let me ask the team. These were really, really big concepts. Do you want to get into the gravity? Do you want to get into the gravity by the end of the page, gravity and electricity?
Well, we're already in it, but
all right, let's go there then.
I highlighted a couple paragraphs I think are good. I think that one you just did was really good. I think you can go over to 540 and try and read 1, 2, third paragraph down. I think would be a good place to kind of come from electricity and what we're talking about now.
It says, okay, so in the green sentence, it says that means light waves are the recording principle of nature. They were talking about the electronic tube of a TV might be well likened to the seed of a man. The pattern of a man is in the seed, but the man is not in it. That also means that all matter is but thought recordings for all matter is wave motion. It necessarily follows that your body is but a thought record of your mind thinking, which is operating within the cosmic vacuum tube just as long as you can keep it vitalized sufficiently to create the image of you which your thinking is making. That means that matter is but pure thought, for all matter manifest idea. That's a big one.
So that again, right, represents what we've been talking about. Every one of us sitting here right now, if you want to know why you are the way you are, why you feel the way you feel, it is because you are the sum total of every thought, feeling, and action you've ever had in your life. And then second to that is we are all collectively the sum total of every thought, feeling, and action that has ever existed in this particular plane, in this domain. So we're all collectively one.
So if we actually cut ourselves in half, hypothetically saying, would we see rings in our body like we see tree rings?
Well, everything is like if you do a cross section of our bone, it's circular, and there's always going to be, it's porous. So in other words, everything in the body, if you go down cross sectionally like this, it's rings. And they indicated that there's really nothing in organic life that doesn't have a ring. In other words, there's nothing in organic life that actually closes out that ring fully.
All right. So that's our challenge for everyone. As you go throughout the week, begin to look for all other things that have these rings and look for every example. I believe that the universe will certainly align that as we go through. We've got all kinds of comments in the chat box of people that are capturing some of this, and Karen Elkins is helping us keep all of that together. All right, so there's another powerful thing that I wanted to bring up before we end up going to our next break. So I want to bring up the image because they use the electric tube as if in a TV. So if we can pull up 49, slide 49, please. Just wanted to mention, see what happens is many of us don't understand how TVs work. We don't understand how electricity works. We don't understand how the compression and expansion of tires work. So I just brought this up because literally what they're describing on the few pages before is a little bit like this. Is it not, Jim? Talking about the electric tube.
Yeah, it's a vacuum tube. It's
okay,
vacuum.
Thank you. The vacuum tube.
Yeah.
I've been saying to people for years, it's been called television, but I've been saying to people that the more you watch television, it really is telling you a vision. It's somebody else's screen that you're living instead of your own. And I cut television news out of my life 10 years ago because why did I want to live somebody else's life? Now I have no problem. People watch movies and TV, enjoy. Please don't send me emails being mad at me. However, I do find that the more you spend time having someone else tell you a vision, the less, it's been my personal experience, that the less you're living the vision that you created for yourself with the divine.
I deal with a lot of people for counsel, and you'd be amazed at how many people waste so much time in that alternate reality, in that little tube, right? And what Walter and Russell and Leah are also explaining is that little tube is exactly what, like the universe and what God uses to create the universe. It's a vacuum tube. That's the zero stillness. And the image projected in it is only lines of resolution. You got 720 or 1240 lines of resolution. So that is the same spectrum, color spectrum that we live in. Is there lines of resolution within the color spectrum also? So when you look at a TV, you realize all of it is an alternate reality, which means that it's a mind universe. It's not a physical universe. There's no energy in matter. The energy is in idea. All idea is within all of us. That's a hard concept, I get, but just remember, there's no energy in the chair that I'm sitting in, but the idea behind the chair is that it remains, and it always will remain, as the key source and the power, right? The energy is in the idea of the chair that I sit in, not the chair itself. That makes sense, right? The energy is not in the painting. It's in the vision that the artist saw before the painting was put together. That's where the energy is. It's in the thought concept. It's in the mind universe.
Well, and let me ask the panel before we go to break. When you think about that vision, like we were just talking about, reality, we've all met people who are so into whatever the television has told them that they believe it is absolute truth. And that even when, like, for example, when I've personally been somewhere and I said, well, that's not what happened. They go, well, no, but that's what the news said. And I'm saying, and I'm telling you, that is not what happened. I saw it with my own eyes. The credence that they give to the television versus someone who actually saw it with their own eyes, it shows me what a completely inverted reality that we're in.
Go to Russia. Go to Russia if you want to know what TV, how programmed people can be. A whole society is programmed by the propaganda that's put in that TV, and it's controlled by Putin. He has complete control of the airwaves, and they program the whole society. And when they explain to the society, this is what's really happening, they're like, no, that's not what's happening. They're Nazis. When you're talking about people that are Jewish, being Nazis, where it's like that's what they can make you believe anything. And the same thing happens subtly here. Commercials are all about. I worked in the commercial world for years, and what sells in the commercial world: sex, action, and violence. That's what sells. So that's what when they market, they do the news. What sells? Sex, action, and violence. It's never harmonious, good things. Do we ever seen a news channel about the good events that have happened today? Here we go. We're going to run down this long list of good events. But you turn on a news channel and you hear about chaos, dissension, trouble, thievery, jail, institutions, and all these things. And again, that creates a world like why you wonder why people are so afraid. The TV can literally polarize you into fear, thinking the world's doomsday. Look at War of the Worlds when that first came out. And it was on the radio. People literally thought the world had been invaded by Martians. There were certain people, right? When that, I can't remember his name. I'm trying to think of his name. It was a director.
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles, yes. And he did that whole thing, and it was like literally. So that was the radio. That wasn't even the TV. It wasn't even imaging. It was just a voice. And we literally believed that it was going on.
Jim, can you share in 60 seconds what the War of the Worlds was before I go to Margaret for somebody who doesn't know what that was? Because I just learned of it a few years ago myself.
Well, it was a radio broadcast where they convinced people that aliens had landed in New Jersey and were killing and arresting and murdering, destroying homes and people. And it created a panic around the world. I mean, around the country, and people were literally committing suicide to avoid being caught by the aliens that were not even there. Orson Welles was a great storyteller, and that was one way you could make it go wrong.
Margaret, you have a comment, and then we'll go to Karen before we go to break.
Well, the Russells always said this is a mind-motional universe, not a matter, substance, energy universe. And, with the onset of artificial intelligence, the more we can get this type of content out so that it's retrieved, the more we can skew it in our direction.
Oh, wow.
So because it's almost like the world is becoming one mind, with AI. And you don't want the predominance to be the sex, the violence, the fighting. You want the predominance to be harmonious interchange.
Yes. I love, there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. And before I hand it to Karen, I want to pull up Deborah's comment there in the chat box. She said the programming here is really no more than it is in other countries. Depends on who you talk to. It appears to be more blatant every day. And Deborah, I would totally agree with you. Absolutely. Karen, you agreed to come on when you had something to add? No, nothing. Okay. So he's just trying to help there with John, with James. So what we'll do is we'll do our next break. We're running a few minutes behind, but we're down to our last 5 pages. So panel, when we return, we'll be starting here on page 541 as we finish up. What exactly 2 and 3. All right, if you're within earshot, if you will find your way back. Lots of great comments in the chat box, and what a fun, robust conversation. I'll remind our panel to get to come off mute. It automatically sets you on mute when you come on. So let us know. So I want to ask everyone who is listening in, we've got many that have been following us now for many, many months. Do you find that some of these concepts are starting to land a little more easily? A little more easily. So remember that Leo said that every word of the home study course is like a mini illumination. So let's go to what Miss Deborah said. She has a good comment before we dive into the top of page 541. Jim, if you could read that comment, please.
It appears to me that the current is never turned off. It is us who sometimes close down and become oblivious, to the truth that we are always connected to the universal flow of divine energy. Deborah, thank you for that. That is so important. That therein lies the truth of it all. We can give up our power to others and have them direct our lives, or we can maintain it in ourselves. And the way that is done is through communion with your inner self, your inner source. That should be your dominant thought and action every day. And blind obedience is what's led to all horrors throughout history.
Yes. All right, so let's go. We're going to drive this thing home with our last few good conversations. Sorry, I'm stuttering myself. Top of page 541. So top of page 541, I want to read a few things, and I'm going to ask Ken to comment. There's one more lesson that the electronic tube might clarify for you, and that's the lesson of dimension. Someday during your spiritual unfolding of inner sensory perception, you'll become aware of the fact that dimension is but an imagined effect. It might help you to take the first step in gaining this awareness, if you will, but realize that when you look out upon a 50-mile expanse of land, buildings, people, and events, you see it all within a dimensionless pinpoint of space within your eye. The whole universe is thus reducible to the non-dimension of mind knowing. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment and ask Ken to talk about it, because Ken has been saying this to me, but I didn't really get this until about a year into what he was saying. So Ken, in your way, explain what this means when you're looking out at the forest.
Well, we were looking over at the blanket of trees up there at Shenandoah Forest, and they were in the beautiful October time when the fall is there. And so the colors were just magnificent. And when you look upon a blanket of trees like that and you're up above and you're looking down, it looks like a canopy, like it's completely solid. But we all know, like tree, I was explaining to Kimberly, like, that tree is 90% air, those leaves, and that you think about it, right? And so if it's 90% air, then how is that, all that force and all those trees fitting into a measureless point on your pupil, right? We're talking a pupil now, that science can't say, oh, it's coming in the left side pupil and the right side pupil. Remember, it's measureless. But we know it's there because how could you fit this computer screen and all that's behind me, these books, in your eye? It goes through this media, the screen you're on, and projects back to you, which is the same effect everywhere you go. It's just light bending and being squeezed and being expanded and squeezed and expanded, just like the room you're in. That chair seems real, but the reality of it is, as science has told you, even the floor you're standing on is a bunch of atoms oscillating and moving rapid speed, like Margaret was talking about. So how does all that fit in your eye? And that tells you this is a dimensionless universe. There is no dimension. The dimension is in the mind. The mind converts everything, converts light. Everything you think is solid is converted into light, which you call your pupil, and then goes into your brain, which gives you a visual image of what you're seeing. So our whole lives, we've been walking around, and kind of like I use the metaphor of, if you think about when you walk around, you see a bunch of trees, right? And you think, wow, those trees are gorgeous. Do you realize there's a bottom half of that tree equal in proportion to the top half? Are you only seeing half the tree, right? Because really, most of us, for a long time, for me, I only saw half the tree. But when I started looking at the whole picture of life, the piston, the ups and downs, compression, expansion, the root system came into mind. Then I found out density-wise and weight-wise, the root system is equal in proportion to that which is above the ground. So the ground becomes the equator, right? and the mother womb of earth is expressing that tree, but we only see half the tree, half the bush. So realizing that is like all of it's an illusion. None of it is anything but light. What makes it real is our minds. And the same thing with your life. Your life is the sum total of what you've been inputting in your mind. And one of the things you're going to hear in this lesson is you can only know with what you think. And you can only think with what you know. What this podcast is about, it's about adding new knowledge into your thinking. So now you can think with something different that you never could think with before. And now your knowledge expands, right? Because you're adding new stuff in.
I love that. I'll ask the team to respond, but I want to go back to Bonnie's comment 2 times ago. It says, they have always been with me. So Bonnie says this, they've always been with me. I'm just more aware than I've ever been. And then Karen Mahan said this when I asked about their awareness. Yes, last week was the first time I understood the 0 to 4, and it felt very expansive and exciting. All right, that's why we do what we do, isn't it, team? And then Bonnie says again, I love what Ken is talking about and understanding, and giggle when I'm using the vacuum cleaner. All right, leave it to Bonnie. Margaret?
Well, just one idea too, when Ken mentioned the womb of earth, the root system is in the womb of the earth and you don't see it. And you know that popular phrase, behind every great man, there's a great woman. The woman is always the nurturing side, but it's often the invisible side.
Yep.
And then the man is the engineer or the one that's building or accomplishing, but he would probably be far less potent if he didn't have the female half in his life. So in other words, a woman's work is often invisible, you know. And yet it's just as essential.
There you go.
And the opportunity I would add to that is that because of that, Margaret, because we as humans have not understood this natural science portion of it, if men truly understood it, I believe that they, in the expression of their divine masculine, the full essence of their masculine, they would then lift up what the feminine was about if they truly understood it, that principle of the both. Does that make sense, Jim?
Well, yeah, but and I would go so far as to say is we don't want to overlook the opposite expression of the feminine. The opposite expression of feminine is the builder. Everything that everybody that is created comes out of the womb of the feminine at all octaves. It wouldn't exist without the feminine nature. It's the concentrative inward thinking of the masculine nature that creates the heat and the fire that the feminine turns into bodies. So it's so equal and opposite, and for a male to express for a male to repress the feminine outside of themselves or in themselves is going to war with yourself. And the equal and opposite is that for the feminine to repress the masculine, they're going to war with themselves. So the solution is for us not to repress each other, but to embrace each other.
Well, I want to give Ken credit before I hand it over to him. So this has been a very interesting rhythmic balance interchange relationship with Ken and I've learned a lot as I've been learning the science and in the relationship. And every once in a while, he will remind me that he needs me more in my feminine, because sometimes my masculine is too much. I know that's going to be shocking to you all, but sometimes my masculine is too much. I totally own that. And so him bringing that strong masculine, though, is giving me space to be able to rest into that space a little bit more. Ken?
Yeah, and I'm going to counter that with, in being with a strong woman and a capable woman, like my girl and the love of my life, it allows me to get in touch with what Jim talks about, my feminine side, because I now have the freedom to do that without feeling embarrassed or bravado, and I can then share with the feminine those things that I don't want to share with the masculine, which allows me to get in touch with those sides. Just like Kimberly said, hey, I'd like a little more of that feminine side, and that's my feminine side asking for her feminine side, because it each gives to the other. I would encourage you to go to 541, just go to that next paragraph, the third paragraph down. And I think, hon, you could read that. That would be a good paragraph to read. It talks about the tree there.
The one that says you have?
Yes.
Okay, you have undoubtedly So let me just jump right above that where I had the heart, though, because it was talking about, yes, the above is a wonderful lesson for one who is mystified by the vague idea of immortality, but a still greater lesson of universality. And so I'd ask you to please type in the chat box universality. That's an important word to understand. I blew past that when I was first reading the home study course. The homecoming at the University of Science and Philosophy's recent homecoming, the theme was universality, but it says awaits deep meditation by you upon the thoughts above given. You have undoubtedly wondered much about the unfolding of a tree or a human body from a microscopic seed. All right, before I continue, can I just chuckle for a moment? Did all of you all wonder that your whole life? Like I never did. I was so lost in this human story. I can absolutely confess that I was not wondering how a tree unfolded. I was too worried about feeding my family. Okay. So I had to chuckle when she says, you have undoubtedly wondered. And I was thinking, no. I was pretty asleep. Many years are consumed in that process after you put the seed in your own yard to generate a wave current, or again, unfolding the record contained in that patterned electronic tube. The electronic tube seeds of nature have their film patterns enfolded within them. So when we plant a tulip bulb, within that bulb is the pattern of a tulip, okay? Man has to carry his patterns separately. Also his projection machine, whereas nature's projection machine is the womb of the earth. All right, so before you comment on that, Ken, I want to ask James to bring up slide 47 and 40, actually 46, 47, and 48, because I want to bring up a couple of things. On slide 46 there, you're going to see where the acorn is actually the image there of the tree. So I thought that was really neat to see the two acorns together. We don't often get to see that part of the process. And then we're talking about the way I wanted to remind us all, the next slide is an actual film projector because it takes light to then move through what the next slide is, the actual stills. So we understand in the old ways of the movie business, my first career early in high school, I used to work at a movie theater and it was a big deal to see who could run those stills. And whenever that film would break, the movie would stop and an alert would go on because there was no motion in the movie theater and they would all come back. The movie's broken. The movie's broken. And I just thought, Ken, that really had a lot to do with what you were saying there, is that it's already there patterned within. It needs light to show the motion.
Yeah, what they're talking about when you go back to that acorn, if you will pull that back up, James.
Slide 46.
You get a lot of that, right? So there's your tube, right? There's the tubular that's being talked about. That would be a tree in its beginning. Starts out as a tube that stems from the acorn. And then you got your acorn, right? Crack that acorn open and find the pattern of a 40-foot oak tree in there, and you're not going to find it. There isn't a microscope in the world, no matter how powerful or quantum or nuclear it is, that can show you the pattern of that tree within that acorn. But we all know it's in there. And that's the difference between sensing and knowing. We can sense the acorn, but it's only through knowing can we see that there's a pattern of an oak tree within that acorn. And that is the miracle of nature. It's like, it's an idea. The idea is the pattern in there, and it's in a gaseous form before it's in a material form. So it's the gases are pattern recorded in the gases that are within that seed is a gaseous form that carries the pattern of that full-grown oak tree.
Karen, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do, because when you think of particles in the wave and you look at the dimensionality of a torus field, and everybody has a field. We've discussed that before. Within that field, as it moves, those matrices create a cat and a dog or this or that. That's part of the projection. And when you turn on a TV screen, what it does is everything is pixelized. And it pixelizes it into the image that's in front of you. And so you're always witnessing where you put yourself, where you turn that channel on that TV screen. So it's an interesting sort of metaphor that light is nothing but particles in the wave, arranging and rearranging. The TV set shows it. And the interesting thing about the tube is no different than a bubble. Since we live in liquid, solids, and gases, what's happening within that TV tube is those gases are lighting up, which is what happens with us. When we're given the breath, we're given voice, we are basically expressing the gas, the air, the spirit that is within us, within our own bubble. And so it's an opportunity for us, as you've said, many of you guys are all saying, we do create our reality based on what we're projecting and thinking and speaking and doing every single day. So I don't want to discount that this body is not a toolbox, that is a reflection of our thinking in this crystalline matrix. And there's always a chance to change.
That's a perfect segue, Karen, to what we have on the conclusion on page 543. You could not have said that any better, because I know you do a lot of prep and getting ready for these things as well. But the conclusion says this: the time has come when we must now learn that we live within a cosmic electronic vacuum tube of invisibility. As mental beings, notice they're both capitalized, who project actions from that vacuum condition to manifest our creative desires. Look within a television vacuum tube for a moment. All you can see there are flashes of light which come and go. They come only because of a mind desire to manifest invisible idea into visible form. They go when the invisible idea has been expressed and the desire for further expression ceases for a while. Ask yourself this question. So I'm going to read 2 more paragraphs and I'm going to open up the panel. Ask yourself this question: will those light flashes remain in that tube unless forced to remain there by a power outside of their own light? Or have they the power within themselves to hold their units together? You have but one answer. Those light flashes have been created to manifest mind, idea, in action. They have no energy of their own. They will cease when the mind ceases to desire a manifestation by action. What has happened within that vacuum? Mind thinking has been visibly embodied. That is all that happened. That is all that creation is. Creation in all capital letters. That is all that gravity is. That is all the light waves are. And that is all that they do. Now, when we go on to the next page, I'm going to ask the panel, I'm going to read what's the light blue on the next page. And it says this: the moment you connect the power of your thinking to that vacuum, it immediately begins to record your thoughts in light flashes, which come and go as the light flashes of suns and stars of the cosmic vacuum come and go, like flashes of fireflies in the meadows. So, James, if you'll go to slide 50, I'll ask the panel to comment, because slide 50 shows you what fireflies look like in a meadow. And think about how any of us as children were mesmerized by fireflies. Ken had an interesting firefly experience because they don't do this much in California.
Yeah, the first time I saw a firefly in person was out here a year and a half ago when I came out here. I just found it fascinating. I had heard about them and seen them, and to see that luminescence come from nature is the same thing. A firefly is projecting light. That's what we are. We are projecting light, and that light that we project are our thoughts, and then our feelings, and then our actions. That's all a light projection based on what we see and what we believe and what we feed ourselves. That's why it's so important to read and to add new knowledge in, because then it'll add new thinking in. If you want your life to change, then you got to change the way you're thinking. And the only way to do that is to add something new in instead of what's there. We cannot fix our broken selves with the mind that created our broken selves, right? With the thinking, rather than, not the mind, the better word would be the thinking that created us cannot fix us. We don't have that answer. So we need new knowledge. We need then to translate that information. We need new information to translate that into knowledge so that we can change and direct our lives in the manner which we'd like. Learning, how does one express love? By starting right now. Just trying to be loving in everything you do, instead of do it begrudgingly or in compliance in life. Don't comply to your life anymore. Do it with love. And we've talked about it, whether you're sweeping the kitchen floor or you're designing a masterpiece, they're both done with the same amount of love for them to be done in a masterful way.
I love that. So, Margaret, I'm going to ask you to chime in, and then Jim. But while you're doing that, I'm going to ask everyone who's watching here to please put in the chat box, what is one thing that you're going to pour more love into this week? Is it sweeping up your floor? Is it offering some good cheer to your neighbors? Is it simply doing the grocery shopping? What is something that you're going to pour more love into this week on that note? And Margaret, final thoughts here for this lesson.
Yeah, Deborah had a quick question. She says, so if this is not a dimensional universe, is all this talk about ascending to the higher dimensions an illusion? And I would just say that, actually, it's not that we're ascending to a higher dimension, it's that we're seeking the stillness so that we can see behind the veil. Because if you become a part of the fulcrum, you're seeing everything. You're seeing 360 degrees, not just a narrow band. So, in other words, we want to seek stillness and seek the universal vacuum or the fulcrum to have greater comprehension.
Jim, you want to add to that? Because I do want you to know that on slide 30, I have where you laid the octave on top of the wave in case you want to refer to that.
Okay. The concept that we want to grasp, I'm sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. Forgive me. I wanted to touch on the difference. I'm grieving right now for the loss of my partner, my friend, and someone that was with me for 45 years. But I'm not allowing that grief to make me stop and not live my life. I'm getting up every day. I'm going about the routines. I'm doing everything the best I can, and I'm pouring love into everything. And I continue to think to my spouse, think in communication with her as much as I did when she was here. So my point is, there's no loss that takes place here. There's change. This is an evolving universe, and we're evolving with it. And we're in the process of building a body that will reflect the full divinity of God. I'm not there yet. You're not there yet, but we will be. And that's the reason that the universe exists. That's why it's here. Simply to manifest that divinity. And sometimes we lose patience with the process, but we're moving along. It's happening.
Jim, you have shown incredible wisdom as you're helping us all and walking us through your process as well. So a gracious thank you for being so vulnerable. Karen?
We're talking about, I think, to answer part of that question is the compression of light. So as we go from being compressed to being expanded and back and forth, there is a sense of compression and lightness within it, within our own being. So I do think we traverse the no difference that we're liquid, solids, and gases ourselves, that when we leave this body, we become more gases. People know those as ghosts. So that I think in a sense, we can call it, I'm going to call it, for a lack of a better word, different kinds of dimensions of being in different states of matter, which is what Walter Russell talks about, which I think is a way of understanding that we're in different states of matter during those dimensionalities of where it is that we find ourselves. And when we look at particles and waves, no different than the TV screen behind the tube, we're nothing but waves. We're nothing but particles. So how can we all be one? It's all one in those particles, nothing but those little dancing particles that get arranged in a particular configuration by our thoughts and then get rearranged. So I will have that, Kimberly, what you're talking about next, because if you look at the compression and the both sense, you turn that sideways and you think of it in the wave and you look at the expansion and contraction. That's what we're going through all the time. We're going through those dimensionality of octaves, which make the elements, which make life itself. So this is where color, light, sound, chemistry, and all of that's something that Walter Russell understood. It was not a single thing. It was everything.
So I want to add to that part of what I think the beauty is, and then I'm going to ask Margaret and Ken to help wrap us up before we share the visual journey. Part of the power, I believe, is understanding about this wave and understanding this periodic elements and understanding the nature, the outline of nature as octaves, is that it goes to what Walter talks about later, the grand symphony of creation. What has been revealed to me as I have studied this particular work is that we really are an individual symphony and a universal symphony, and that when we truly understand that we are each a song and we're singing our song in the universe, then there's great beauty that comes forward. And part of why it's so difficult for us right now is because the music that's being played is very harsh music, and we're all ready to sing a new tune. Margaret, last thought before our visual journey, and I'll hand it to Ken before we kick it off to the visual journey.
Yeah, my last thought is, it's important for us to insulate ourselves from the noise. And I think the whole idea in this lesson of rings, there's a beautiful quote in the Divine Iliad: I am within all things centering them, and I'm without all things controlling them. So in other words, when you have this, the effort toward compression, the resistance to the compression is in the very center. And that's why you have a ring, because God controls from the center and also from the outside. And that's why the Russells talk about rings. And just as a visual, Kim, the vacuum tube actually looks like this.
And that's in what book, Margaret?
Yeah, Atomic Suicide, page 220.
Can you show them the front cover, please?
Yeah.
It's in the home study course too.
But the vacuum tube, you can visualize that as the seed of an acorn or the seed of a human. In other words, it's an insulated seed. It's the light rings show up, and it's actually a very good visual in this lesson. So if people would really go back and study it deeply, their analogy with the vacuum tube, I think, is brilliant.
Love that. Ken, last comment before the visual journey.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we stick to what we read, and that, we're reading, it was illustrated on the pupil. It is a dimensionless universe. There's not one dimension, two dimension, three dimension, fourth dimension, five dimension. It's dimensionless. That's the key, right? Now, can you bring up that elements of matter with the wave in it, hon, that you had up there? Every one of those elements is light, moving at a different speed, but it's still light. It's only one element, and it's just moving faster and slower. As soon as you get past Jim's 4.5 octave carbon, you're moving faster than the speed of light, and that's why science can't measure it. But everything is light. It's just a question of how fast it's moving, sort of like a helicopter blade, right? You see it sitting there and it's just 4 blades, and then it's moving. It looks like a solid disc. The faster it moves, the more solid that blade would look. That's what every one of those elements in there is, a piece of light moving faster or slower depending on what octave it's in. So don't get confused about octaves and argons and helium and, all the elements that you need to know. That's not what it's about. It's still only one thing. It's light. Right? Remember that. It's just in different stages and different pressure variances, and that's what we're talking about now. So it sounds a little complicated, but don't ever forget, it's just light.
All right. So we have a few questions we'll do after our visual journey. But for our visual journey here today, this is the gift that Karen gives us. Karen, what do we have for our gift this evening?
This is the one where Ken actually spoke last time and we did the journey. I will have the other for you. My computer does, when we're doing the show and I'm trying to, it just locks up.
So we have a beautiful, so last week, Ken actually recited the salutation of the day, which is from the Divine Iliad. Karen took a recording of Ken and to put it to music and to images. So why don't we use that for our visual journey? And this would be something that any of you are welcome to tune into every day. It has great power. So take a look and enjoy. And it will magically show up in just a moment. James is working on it.
The one is still coming.
There we go.
My soul quickeneth with the telling of the coming of the new day. This day will be of my making, whether I choose to live it in spirit or in flesh, on the mountaintop or earthbound. My yesterday is what I made it, perfect or imperfect. I see it in memory only. My today is what I will to make it. I will to make it perfect. I have the power to build the day or rend the day. If I rend the day, I create mayhap, 10 times 10 to undo the rending. If I build the day, I will have lived the day in the fulfillment of the one purpose, which is God's purpose for my life. So I may meet the day with knowledge. These are the words with which I greet the day. This is the spirit of the dawn. To me, the universe is an open book. I need not learn, I shall know. I shall see the unseen from the mountaintops, and I shall hear the music of the spheres. I shall know the transcendental joy of creation. I shall know immortality. I shall bestow immortality. I shall have the power to give immortality to anyone who would ask. Would I reach my hand into the darkness and pull them into the light? And I shall keep my body charged for that purpose, which is my purpose to fulfill. The dynamic power of the universe shall be behind my thinking. Power shall be mine to give by the wayside. I shall not deny to any man that which is mine to give. I shall stand on the electrodes of the universe and command that which is universal. None shall stay the hand in building this day. I shall not haste the day, nor shall I waste the day, nor shall I pay any heed to the tomorrow. All things that I shall do today, I shall desire to do. My power shall be in knowing. My power shall be in thinking true. My power shall be in humility. The taint of arrogance I shall not know. That which is I shall I keep within the shadow of the beautiful temple of modesty. But if that which I were to do were worthy, I shall send it forth, so my doing shall be true. Problems shall be as chaff before the wind. If perchance the day shall hand me anything bitter, it shall become sweet as I bring it to my lips. Truth will guide my footsteps through tortuous paths. From all that is unlovely shall my eyes be immune. I shall desire to see the beauty in all things. None shall stay my hand from building of this day. I shall meet in patience with patience, unkindness with kindness. Force shall I meet with gentleness. And my countenance shall reflect the spirit within me, so others can hearken to my song as I sing the day through with a glad song into the golden evening. And as I cross the threshold of this day, I cross it with joy and thanksgiving, wanting nothing else but thy light centering my mind. Amen.
Lovely. I think we had a little bit of a sound glitch at the beginning. There was music on the whole track, so we'll have that uploaded on the YouTube channel. But a gracious thank you, Karen.
Yes,
on
great
mute.
job, Karen.
Karen's on mute.
Sometimes. So
We will have that with the music there and there on the YouTube channel. So that was just simply a technical glitch. So thank you, Karen, for pulling together the visuals, and thank you, Ken, for the vibration, the wave vibration, which you were sending everyone here as you recovered from your hip surgery. So I did see that there was a question as we wrap up here. And if you would, Margaret, read Deborah's question, please. Deborah asked this.
Is it in the still point that we meet unity beyond dimensionality? And I would say yes.
So would I.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jim, you want to add to that?
At that still point, we are unity.
Okay.
No longer
All right.
dimension.
Remember, you can enter there into meditation, and you know that we achieve by concentrating and decentrating. That is that piston of meditation.
All right. Any other questions that we have from the group as we wrap up here today? So just to thank you to Ken and Karen and to the individual team. Then here, what I would recommend as we wrap up here today, just want to remind you all of a couple of things. If we'll go to slide 16, please. I want to say a gracious thank you to all of our subscribers. We're up to over 550 subscribers. We're almost to that particular watch hours. So I would encourage you to listen to that salutation of the day, turn on that ocean. You'll certainly help the channel there. And I do want to go back here, and I want to mention something on slide 25, please, if you'll jump ahead to that. So there are additional resources. For some of you, you may want additional resources. Go back and listen to some of our videos. Darren Collum, actually, there on the philosophy.org, their website, the University for Science and philosophy. He is the former chief science officer. Some of you may find his work certainly interesting and intriguing, as well as another Russell student. You'll see Scott Vanderpool over there on the next slide, 26. I've added him to the slide, and he has a channel called 3D Frequency on the YouTube channel. He's also trying to talk about science, talk about the Russell science in a way that would appeal to other scientists. So that is our way of continuing to encourage others to keep spreading the word. And remember, part of your role with all this might not even be for you to understand it as much as it is to help explain it to others. So next week is lesson 28, the last lesson in unit 7. We want to say a gracious thank you to you all. So may we follow flow. May we celebrate whatever country that you're in. May we simply celebrate love this week, and however it is that you do that. And yes, we will be on next weekend as well as we wrap up the year 2024 together. A gracious thank you, everyone. Until next week.